Hey, everybody, it's Erin Kerry, and I am so excited to be speaking with Dr. Brent Dorval today. He is the creator of the FIT test, and that stands for Food Inflammation Test. He was involved in the creation of the first HIV/AIDS rapid diagnostic assay. Dr. Dorval has over 25 years of experience in strategic management of research, manufacturing, and regulatory affairs in the area of medical devices and diagnostics. Previously, Dr. Dorval held a number of management positions and served as an advisor to the World Health Organization Committee on Vaccines and Diagnostics, which I find so fascinating. Dr. Dorval has several patents covering rapid assays, novel biomarkers, and a novel poliovirus vaccine, which I'd love to get into that if we have time. Dr. Dorval holds a PhD in medical microbiology and immunology from the College of Medicine, the Ohio State University, and performed postdoctoral studies and was a visiting scholar in the Department of Chemistry at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So, Dr. Dorval, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Erin, and appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about food sensitivities and go over some important points regarding food sensitivities. And with that intro, let's just get started.
Yeah.
So today, what we're going to look at is we're going to explore the intersection of inflammation, gut permeability, and immunity, and try to get a sense of that really how those three are connected and really integral to food sensitivities, and as well as the application to a wide variety of other diseases. It just important initially, let's just look at a few objectives of the overall talk itself. We'd like to explore the role of different food sensitivities and the inflammatory cascade, the complement cascade specifically, and how it affects gut permeability. We'll look at the function of C3D testing in food sensitivities. That's very important. And discuss, the value benefits of early food sensitivity testing and patient compliance outcomes and the tools that KBMO Diagnostics provides. And we're going to look again, inflammation and as a root cause of chronic conditions. So that is going to be kind of a central theme. Inflammation, what is that and why is that important?
Yeah, I'm so glad that we are going over this because food sensitivities, that's a hot topic right now. And I know you'll get into how many people right now are struggling from that and how it's different from an allergy. But there are a lot of different tests that are testing these things, but your test just has an extra little, as one of my kids would say, it levels up. It has an extra level that's really important. So I'm super excited about this.
Yes, thank you for that, Erin. And what we'll do is in a few slides ahead, we'll go ahead into that specifically and hopefully flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to go over a couple definitions. They're very basic. Food allergy, I think everybody must know that's an IgE-mediated response. It's a type 1 hypersensitivity. And that's like to peanut or fish where you have an immediate response and it can be life-threatening. And very often these individuals have a pen, an EpiPen, to inject adrenaline, which will reverse some of the reactions associated with this. We'll be speaking today about food sensitivity, and that's an immunologic reaction to food. It's either IgA or IgG, and it does involve complement. So those are, if you look in the textbook, type 2 and type 3 reactions. So those specifically. We'll be talking about IgG today and not IgA, but I thought I would mention that. And then, of course, there's food intolerance. That's non-immunologic, deficiency of an enzyme or some other component like lactose intolerance. And if you consume milk or milk products, of course, you can't digest them, and you can get quite sick from those. In the next slide, so what we'd like to just discuss for a minute is the formation of immune complex, because that's going to be kind of a central theme here. So you ingest the food and eventually it gets to the gut, and it should remain in the lumen and then pass out of the body normally. But what happens in patients or people that have leaky gut is foods, food additives, chemicals, those sorts of things, they enter the gut, but the gut's leaky. That means the tight junctions that are between the cells, and you see the tall cells, the columnar epithelium, they become leaky, kind of like a sieve. These food antigens then traverse this cellular layer and they go through the basement membrane or the lamina propria. Once they get in there, then the business end really starts, meaning the immunologic reactions. You have antigen presenting cells, they activate T cells, and T cells very often go sideways, and they can have not only a potent response against food antigens, but a lot of times they cross-react with host epithelium and antigens and cause autoimmunity. So that's another aspect of cellular immunity. But what we've been talking about mostly is B cells get activated. And then what happens is they produce a variety of antibodies in succession. So first they'll produce antibodies, IgM. Those are early. Within a few days, you get IgM, followed on by IgG. So those are the long-lasting antibodies produced by B cells. What happens is something very interesting. Those antibodies then bind to food antigens and cause immune complexes. So antigen, antibody, that's called an immune complex. What happens is a lot of times these immune complex, they don't get cleared normally and they deposit right in the tissue. And what happens is you get complement activation right on the tissue. So that is a couple things happen. You get C3A and C5A. Those are potent inflammatory molecules. Those are released. But lastly, you can also get cell lysis if the terminal pathway of complement is activated. They call that the membrane attack complex. You lyse your own cells. And of course, that generates tremendous inflammation and then a lot of the symptoms associated with food sensitivities, whether they be headaches or some other type of irritable bowel type of syndrome.
And okay, so this is so good. And that was just a whole lot of information in one in one fell swoop. So I want to break that down a little bit. So you're saying it starts with leaky gut, or is it that somebody already has leaky gut, or that these things are causing leaky gut?
It could be both. It's kind of the chicken or the egg, and that's a very good point. For instance, in some diseases, diabetes, for instance, or if you had an intestinal infection, a virus or bacteria, they can directly have damage to the epithelium. It causes leaky gut, and then that opens the door for food antigens to cross and food sensitivities to set up. Now, on the other hand, and you can also have people be treated with a variety of antibiotics. The antibiotics are very good at killing the organism that may be the offending organism, but it also alters the gut microbiome, and you uncover the epithelium, and you start to damage it with food particles. So food particles, like we've all heard about wheat and wheat products, they produce certain peptides, certain small fragments of proteins that can be directly toxic and then open the tight junctions themselves. So, and then it's a nasty little circular problem, because once it's opened up, then other food antigens get through. And so now you're setting yourself up for much more intense inflammation and food sensitivity.
That's good. So basically you're saying these things, the food that are supposed to nourish us and provide nutrients for us, at some point, if our gut is leaky and the barrier has been breached, basically, your body is going to form an attack against the very things that are supposed to nourish you and keep you healthy.
That's a very well put. Yes, that's exactly what happens.
I think that's good for people to understand. And even you mentioned wheat. Is it the gliadin in wheat that creates and I know you'll get into zonulin, but that's something that breaks down the gut lining even more. Even if you don't have a sensitivity, or does it make you more prone to having a sensitivity?
So gliadin has a number of portions of it that can directly impact the gut and open up tight junctions and cause inflammation. That's certainly in celiac and Crohn's, and some of those that's especially exacerbated. Now, zonulin is a marker. We'll talk about that later on. But what happens is very often people that have leaky gut, irritable bowel, Crohn's, those sorts of syndromes, the liver produces a molecule zonulin, which is very efficient at opening tight junctions. And it's not only an indicator that there's an inflammatory process going on, but it certainly exacerbates the problem. So we'll discuss that a little bit later, maybe in more detail.
Okay, great. This is great information.
Right. And so the next one, let's just talk about, again, I want to make sure we just have some basic principles here so that we can review them. So barriers. So innate versus acquired. Innate are already there, obviously, ready whenever a problem occurs. Acquired, that's something you need stimulation. And then after stimulation, then you go ahead and provide a response by antibodies. So number one, we all know skin and mucous membranes, stomach acid, and beneficial bacteria. Those are barriers I think everybody pretty well understands. They're quite effective at keeping things out of the body that shouldn't be there so they don't get through and cause a problem. Innate immunity, on the other hand, is a more general process when something gets into the body. So there's so-called white blood cells, and you have macrophages and neutrophils. They engulf these particles, whether it be food or a bacteria or virus or something like that shouldn't be there, and then they dispose of it by simply enzymatic digestion, and it's gone from there. What we didn't mention here is something very important. Complement is a huge part of innate immunity, because what happens is on a lot of different molecules, they call it pattern recognition, so that complement can recognize certain C3 in particular and other proteins can recognize certain patterns of sugars and those sorts of things. And that tells complement, okay, they shouldn't be here. Let's get activated. And when that happens, those can be disposed of normally, but you also generate quite a bit of inflammation, obviously, and we'll discuss that. And then, of course, there's the acquired immunity. There's white blood cells. Those are the T lymphocytes, again, that we talked about in the gut. They can activate B cells, and they can also directly, T killer cells, for instance, can directly interact with cells and kill them and prevent them from doing harm. But the main thing that we'll be discussing today is T cells interact with B cells, and then we form IgM followed by IgG antibodies, which then form the immune complexes. So the end result of an acquired immune response from an antibody perspective is IgG is produced, which recognizes food antigens and then forms an immune complex. So just again, general overview. I mean, food sensitivity and related diseases affect 100 million people worldwide, at least. That's probably very, very conservative, and it's growing. People don't really understand why it's occurring now, but my feeling is that, I'll just say it, processed foods have a lot to do with this, I think, and food additives. I don't think they were there in the diets previously, and I think they must play a role, at least in part. And that's with the prevalence has increased 50% in adults and children in just the past few years. So there's something going on. It's probably multifactorial, but certainly food processing, I think, is involved in some way. And 90% of food sensitivities you find in the big eight food groups: milk, soy, eggs, wheat, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, and shellfish. And obviously that's forms the mainstay of diet for most people, not only in the United States, but in the world itself. An important concept is that one food in a specific group may cause a problem, or it may be more generalized, so that if you were sensitive to one fish, it may be just that one fish, or it may set you up to a sensitivity for many fish, depending on which protein your body is reacting to. And the problem with food sensitivities is they're delayed. So it's and occurs hours and generally several days after you ingest the food. So it's saying, okay, I don't feel well on Thursday, but you may have ingested the food on Monday and Tuesday. So it's hard for the person or the patient to really put their finger on, well, what is it that I ingested that makes me feel this way? So we'll help sort that out by doing testing, and the FIT test is quite good at that. And then delayed food sensitivities, as we discussed, is caused by IgG1 through 4 and immune complexes that form and then activate complement, generate C3 and C5a. Those are aflatoxins, and they cause generalized inflammation and then result in symptoms for the patient.
So this C3 and C5a, right? Is
Yes.
that those? So that's what you test that other tests do not account for most of the time. And that is that's showing what is directly impacting or causing the inflammation, right? Or that is the result of the inflammation at work. Right.
Those molecules will directly cause inflammation. So they're called an aflatoxin. What happens is the immune complex forms, it activates C3, and then C3 immediately splits off a little tiny molecule called C3a, and that then sets the stage for inflammation. Then further activation by complement, you can also generate C5a. So that's another protein that's activated. They split off these little components, but those two are a group of the most potent inflammatory molecules in the body, bar none, more so than prostaglandins or even leukotrienes. So very, very potent inflammatory molecules.
That's good. So if somebody's taking this test and they see those reactions, that's a serious deal then, right?
Right. Our test measures not only the IgG, but it measures inflammation, because we measure the aftermath of C3 activation directly. We do it in a direct measurement.
That's good. Yeah.
So the question comes, when do providers use this FIT test? Why would you use a food inflammation test? And in general, when we talk to a lot of doctors, patients don't feel well in general. They come in, there's something wrong, or they have something much more specific, like an autoimmune disease, thyroid, arthritis, brain fog, fatigue. Digestive and skin issues are probably 50, 60, 75% of all the things we see with food sensitivities. And then you've got other things that involve inflammation, fibroids, of course, cancers, endometriosis, that sort of thing. So the goal of the FIT test is to identify foods that cause or potentially cause inflammation and get them out of the diet so the patient ultimately feels better. We're not saying we can cure autoimmunity or we can cure a thyroid problem or fatigue or any one of these things. But if you can identify a food that causes inflammation, you get it out of the diet, inflammation is reduced, and the patient feels better. And that's the goal here. It may only be 10% better. It could be 50 or 70% better. But the goal is to identify a food, get it out, reduce inflammation, and the patient will feel better.
And I think it's so important. Again, we've talked quite a bit on this podcast about the gut-brain connection and how if you have gut issues with your gut, digestive issues, a lot of time you will have issues with anxiety. And I mean, you mentioned brain fog and fatigue, but I mean, that is so connected that I know for me, just from practicing elimination diets, and I'm excited to take the FIT test for myself to see if there's something else that is causing inflammation, because I just know there are a few things that when I don't consume those things, my brain is so clear. I sleep better. I don't feel anxious, or I don't have any racing, unmanaged thoughts. And I think that's so important for people to understand that if it's causing inflammation in your gut and in your body, your brain is going to suffer as well. So I'm so glad that this test is available to look at that.
Well, that's a very important point, Erin. I'm glad you brought it up, because the intersection between the blood and the brain is the blood-brain barrier, and it's the choroid plexus. And that is a small group of vessels that are in the ventricles of your brain, and they have tight junctions. So if you have leaky gut, you may have leaky brain. And I know people used to
Ah,
say that's absolutely crazy, but it's been shown that the tight junctions also get opened in the choroid plexus. So it's not an efficient filter anymore. And some of these mediators, some of these molecules may gain entry actually into the cerebral spinal fluid and then cause some of these symptoms. So
wow.
what heretofore was kind of that's nonsense. People are starting to understand the link
Mhm.
between the gut and the brain and realize how important it really is.
Yeah.
So again, so we know when a provider would use it, but why do they use it? And again, immune complexes and inflammation may be associated with a variety of things. And ultimately, the underlying problem for many conditions we see on a daily basis. So again, identify, remove, and hopefully the patient feels better by reduction of overall inflammation. That's what we're trying to do here. Now, KBM's unique approach, Erin, that you alluded to, is we do a dual pathway measurement. So we talked a little bit about acquired. So acquired, this test measures IgG 1 through 4. So those are the antibodies. You acquire that immunity after exposure. The innate immune response is complement. So once these immune complexes form, then complement is activated by certain portions of the antibody molecule and then starts to generate the inflammatory media and then molecules, and then ultimately a small flag peptide remains on the immune complex covalently bound, and that's C3D. So we take advantage of the measurement of C3D as a direct indicator that complement's been activated, and absolutely C3A has been generated without any
Wow.
question. So that is a useful thing. So what we do here is we not only get enhanced sensitivity in our test, but we also, it's a measure of inflammation. So you see on the left-hand side, a conventional conjugate, the IgG only test, it only generates one signal, only measures antibody. So if the antibody from your serum binds to the food antigen on the well of an ELISA plate, so that's the FIT test, is an ELISA test. It contains food antigens bound to the plastic wells. You add serum, antibodies from the serum bind to the food antigens, and then you add, we call it a conjugate. It's just a way to visualize what's binding to that food antigen. The conventional assays only measure IgG. That's it. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, the enhanced conjugate measures both IgG and C3D simultaneously, which is an indicator of inflammation. So you not only get better sensitivity, very, very good sensitivity, it gives you some indication of the intensity of the reaction. And this test, we patented it a few years ago, and we find that it's very, very, and we'll talk a little bit about the clinical work we did with it. It seems to be very, very good indicator of foods that cause inflammation, so that when you remove them, I think in general, patients do feel better once you identify that food.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think it's important for people to understand that you can remove to help start the healing process. But I think a question a lot of people would want to know is, can you then add foods back in later
Mhm.
after you've healed? Will your body have a better response after time?
Yeah, I mean, in general, again, during the elimination phase, you want to get out those foods that you tested positive for. So you get those out, and then you add them back one at a time after maybe 6, 8 weeks. Well, lots of physicians have different protocols. So they may say 10, they may say 4, but the idea is you stop eating a particular food, the antibodies go down significantly. The half-life is roughly 2 weeks for an antibody. So if you have an antibody today of 10, in 2 weeks, it'll be 5, and two more weeks, it'll be 2.5. So they go down precipitously. So the idea is remove the food, reduce the antibody load, you'll reduce the immune complex load and the activation of complement. So during that process, the patient may start to feel better, but the idea would be now after that, add a food back one at a time and see if you trigger that immune response. Does antibodies start to be produced again? If it is, it'll start to activate complement. And so if a patient eats this on Monday, it may be fine Tuesday, Wednesday. They say by Thursday, when my symptoms are back, my skin problem, a bowel problem. On the other hand, they may say, okay, no, that particular food doesn't seem to cause a symptom, so that would not be a trigger food. So we use the elimination diet to do that. And if you have a trigger food, then get it out of the diet for a long period of time, 6, 8, 10 months. Then the B cells that produce these antibodies become quiet. So sometimes you can reintroduce a food, albeit infrequently. You don't eat it every day, and you may be able to tolerate it now. But the idea is to quiet the immune system down and then enter the food back into the diet, and then see if it does cause any symptomology.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful and that's super interesting. Now, what about a person, they take this test and they're seeing, and I know you have do you have it color coded, like where it's red, green, yellow, is it that kind of a thing? Like what if somebody sees it light up like a Christmas tree, but it's all red? Then and like everything that they eat is a problem for them. Have you seen that happen before?
In general, this test, if somebody has leaky gut, kind of 3 things happen, and this test is very good at that. You have maybe a dozen, 15 foods that are positive, that are either tan or red, 3 or 4 plus, very high reactivities. Generally, Candida comes up, and if we test zonulin, generally zonulin is high. So zonulin tells us there's leaky gut. Candida is like the canary in the coal mine. Candida is a normal flora in the intestinal lumen, on your skin and elsewhere, but it's normal flora. But it's not normal flora to get through the gut epithelium and you start to produce antibodies against it. So that tells us that the Candida, which should be in low numbers, but in the lumen, is somehow getting across the gut. So when you see that triad, high number of food reactivities, zonulin's high, Candida antibody is one of those high reactivities, then you're most likely dealing with irritable bowel, some inflammatory process. It may be ill-defined, but it kind of tells the physician, a healthcare provider, we need to dig deeper and see what may be going on.
Yeah, that's probably an indicator of a whole lot of other things going on. So that's good to know.
Right, exactly. So the fit test in general, I founded the company in 2004, and I did some postdoc work at MIT and developed a new polio virus vaccine, which was an exciting period, at least of my life. And then later on, I moved my attention to looking more at infectious disease. And when HIV was really raging, the need was for a rapid diagnostic, especially in underdeveloped regions of the world, sub-Saharan Africa, India, and I helped develop that in a very big way, actually, and that was also very excited. Now, for the fit test itself, the patent was granted in 2004. And what I want to emphasize about KBMO Diagnostics and its sister company, Brendan Bioscience, which actually manufactures the fit test, is that we're certified for medical devices. So we're ISO 13485. Very, very tough to get that designation, but it indicates high quality. We're FDA registered and regulated facility, and we follow the Code of Federal Regulations by FDA. And if they want to inspect our facility, they have every right to do that. And our CLIA high complexity lab is where we actually do the testing. So when you send in a sample, the test is actually made in the Brendan Bioscience facility, which is 2 doors over. And that then is tested in our CLIA high complexity lab. And then, of course, the result is generated in the CLIA lab. Now, reproducibility is very important. So we've got good control of in-house production and critical raw materials, and we control and qualify every test kit that's made. Certification. So we are the first company to achieve COPROFIS and ANVISA. Those are simply export permits to places like Mexico, Brazil, which also are stringent processes these days, because they just don't want you shipping in any old product that's not well qualified or hasn't been regulated, in the United States. So we're very, very happy to expand our market in those regions. Now, in general, the FIT test measures 132 foods, colorings, and additives. We have a finger stick capability. So you take a finger stick, and we'll show you that, and you dot it onto Whatman paper and you send it in. We extract the antibodies and immune complexes and analyze those. We have a very easy to understand patient report for both the doctor and the physician. If you've seen some of the reports for other tests, with numbers, I mean, your head spins. This is meant to scan in 30 seconds. You know exactly what you have to do. And we have other compliance tools, like we have an app. So now you can download the app and you can upload the patient report on your smartphone. And we also offer a diet advice through a meal plan.
That's awesome.
Now, this is just, again, as I mentioned, this covers the big 8 foods as well as some other miscellaneous things. So dairy, grains, fruits, additives, microbes, etc. We offer 3 sizes, so-called, of the FIT test. You can do a screen, which is 22 foods and additives alone. We offer the 132, and we just finished development of the FIT 176, which people really, really like. So depending on what you feel the patient needs in terms of a screen, you can expand the panel as you see fit, which is nice. So we felt early on, one size does not fit all, and we give you that option.
That's good. Now, the FIT 22, if somebody is listening and is like, I really want to know, just kind of the heavy hitters, if I'm reacting to the heavy hitters, is that what 22 is for? It's for like
Yes.
The 22 top reacting foods that people can struggle with?
Yes, that is meant to cover 50-60% of all the food sensitivities that you would potentially see, and especially milk, egg, and wheat. I mean, if you look at milk, egg, and wheat, I mean, my God, we're looking at right around, depending on the person, you're looking at about 50% of what's going on. One of those foods most likely is going to be involved. So that is included as a top line in the FIT 22, and then we kind of fill it out and expand it from there.
That's good. And then so somebody could take 22 and go, oh, I think there's still something else going on. There's something else bothering me. So that's when they would go maybe to the 132, or you start with the 132, because I think it's interesting. You have canola oil listed on there, coconut oil, wine, vinegar, spices. That's probably not on the FIT 22, right?
No, those are more generalized. Those are more generalized types of, they're in your diet, but they're not depending on the diet, they're not the major problems. And so we don't include those in the 22. We reflex, and you go into the 132 or the 176.
Okay. That's good to know. I think that's amazing that so many things can be tested.
Yeah, you can. And today I think people are getting away from the milk, wheat, eggs, meat type of diet. They're going into more, if I could say, holistic types of thinking about how they treat their diet. So we're seeing a lot more herbs and vegetables and different types of foods, chia seeds and different things like that, chia seed, I never heard of that until
Yeah.
probably 5 years ago. So while they're a lesser part of the diet, I think the diet is moving towards a more natural and a more, again, holistic diet. So
Mhm.
that's beneficial for a lot of people. Again, we talked about one sample type. People really like this. So it's just a simple finger stick. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but you take a finger stick, you dot it onto a Wattman filter paper, you let it dry, you close the card. We provide a self-addressed stamped envelope. You send it back to the lab, which is KBMO Diagnostics in Hopedale. We analyze the sample and we get back to you in 5 to 7 days. So a lot of people don't know, how do you get my draw? I have to go to some place to get my blood drawn, and I don't like it. I would rather do a finger stick. So for a lot of people, this has become the go-to procedure for a sample. And I would say it started off at 0 because we were just doing serum, and now it's probably about 50 or 60% of all the samples that we test in-house.
So
So
this is something somebody can do for themselves at home, and then they just mail it in, right?
Yes, that technically you can do that, but FDA does not like at-home testing.
Oh,
So
okay.
what we recommend is that it's done under the supervision of a healthcare provider.
Gotcha.
But it's very often, people just don't like finger sticks. Some people, really adverse. So it's an easy alternative for those people, and I would recommend it in a healthcare setting.
Okay, that's
And
good to know.
but
Yeah.
Erin, we are moving towards trying to get this approved as an FDA device. So we're heading towards, like everybody, you want to do personalized medicine, you want the at-home, but FDA, and rightly so, has reservations about people just
Yeah.
testing themselves for anything they want to test them for. So that's kind of where we are right now.
That makes sense. Yeah. Now, is there a difference between a blood draw and a finger stick as far as like, would it change the results if you're getting a vial of blood versus just some spots on a piece of paper?
Good question. No, the sensitivity and the specificity have been carefully compared. So what we've done in-house is we've taken many samples and we've done what we call a match sample. So that, for instance, they draw blood from me, I would do simultaneously or sequentially, I would do a finger stick. So they had my blood draw in that. We test them and we ask the question, okay, what is positive, what is negative, what's the intensity? And there's greater than 90% concurrence between the blood sample that's a draw and the finger stick. So we
Wow.
feel that it's an acceptable alternative for people that prefer that.
That's good to know. I'm sure somebody was wondering that, so that's helpful.
Great. So this just shows it's a very simple thing to do. It only takes a few minutes. On the top, that's the correct thing. You get 5 spots. You want to fill the whole spot in between the dotted circle. At the bottom, that's an incorrectly obtained sample. So we'd have to say, okay, we're going to have to send you another card, and you're going to have to repeat that. So it's pretty straightforward. But
Yeah.
we deal with thousands of people, and occasionally we'll get a card that we have to return, and we have to repeat it.
Yeah, and for anybody who's listening and isn't able to see the PowerPoint, which I will link in the show notes for sure, that's just showing. It kind of looks like an old Scantron, right? That people take tests on. You just need to
Yes.
fill in the circle completely and don't just like dot around it or scribble around. Yeah, so that's basically what that's showing.
Right, and it's really it's a very, the nice thing about it is it's very self-explanatory. So once you see it, it's not rocket science here, thank God. And also now this is just a depiction of a typical patient report, as you alluded to, Erin. And what you can see is high reactivity is red, lower that's 4+, 3+ is tan, and so forth. So what we did is we wanted to design a report that just wasn't full of numbers and ranges, and people just don't understand these things. I've looked at other reports, and I'm not saying the tests are bad. I'm not going to go after any particular company, but we said that's not where we want to be. We want a patient and to pick up a report, look at it and say, oh my God, red, and it's wheat and gluten, I can't eat it. And you want to know that in seconds. So the report is designed to be interpreted almost in an intuitive fashion, not only for the healthcare provider, but for the patient. And then if this facilitates communication as well between the provider and the patient. You're saying, okay, what does 0.4 mean? I mean, I got 0.4 on this. You're telling me the range is point this to point that. It's like people really don't understand it, and it just becomes confusing. Now, this is all based on numbers, but we've taken the numbers out of it and tried to just do it in a pictorial way.
That's good. That's helpful. And so anybody getting it, they would see the red and go, okay, I definitely probably need to steer clear of those things.
That's correct. And that's correct. And then you say, okay, then now I put those in the elimination die. And then it just this other depiction of the patient report, it just blows up and shows you the additives. Additives are very, very important today. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel that a lot of food sensitivities and problems are caused by additives and food processing in general. I mean, additives are great. They may add taste. They make the colors. They make food look pretty. You can store bread for a long time, BHA or BHT. But these are all, if you look at the structures, they're all phenyl compounds. And if you look sideways, you say, well, now you show me cancer-causing chemicals, and they're all phenyl derivatives. So are these things really good for me? I mean, they may have a beneficial for food preservation and appearance, but should I really be consuming these things? So I just blew up the additive section just to highlight that. So it's a nice section of the aspartame, benzoic, butylated hydroxyanisole, MSG. There's a big one. Polysorbate, and the reds, and saccharin, and a few others.
Oh, I love that you include some of those food dyes on there too, because it's amazing how much those are in our diet and we don't even know it. Like I've seen different food dyes in bread. Like why does bread need food dye?
Exactly.
And that could be really problematic for somebody. That's important.
Right. And if you, we provide the provider's guide to all the practitioners, and we show the chemical structures of those things. And if you look at the chemical structures of those things, you'd say, I should not be consuming them. I mean, honest to God, they are phenyl compounds and phenyl derivatives that in any other instance, you'd swear were very similar to pesticides and other things that cause cancer.
That's good to know. I think it's so important for parents to hear that, because most of the food in children's food, whatever that looks like, will contain these things. And I mean, nuggets and, processed snacks and chips and all the candy. Oh my goodness. We're the worst, I think, in this country of having food dyes in all of our candy. I know in Europe, they've taken it out in a big way, but I think that's really important to check for that. Now, is that available in the FIT 132 test, or is it just the 176?
No, that's available in the 132, and then we've added a few more additives and colorings in the expanded 176 panel.
Okay, that's good to know.
But people find those quite useful, as you mentioned, especially for children, because they're acclimatized now. Their cereal is red or yellow or some other color, and that's what these are. I mean, they're really just additives, and they don't add taste. They just add appearance.
But they're, like you said, they're chemicals. And that does no good for the gut lining as well, right?
That's absolutely correct. Absolutely. And you get a lot of cross reactivities from that. And that's also explained in the guide. And then, so the next thing we go to is, so we've got a nice, easy to understand report. From that report, we generate a meal plan, a suggested meal plan, which is healthy and nutritious. So you're taking things out. Now you want to make sure the patient can consume some things that are healthy and nutritious. So we provide a meal plan, and it's, depending on the day and depending on breakfast or dinner, whatever you're eating, there's some suggestions there, and patients find that very, very helpful as well. So that's provided free along with the test. And then we move into the mobile app. If there's one thing everybody has today is a mobile phone. So we have an app and no one else has that. So you can download the app and then you can use that app to then upload your patient report. And you say, oh, that's clever, but it's not only clever, people find it useful. So if you're out shopping or if you're out eating in a restaurant, hopefully that'll come back after COVID's gone. But, you can say, oh my God, let me see, MSG is in my Chinese food. Wait a minute, I can't have that because I can immediately look on my mobile app. So it's a quick scan reference when you're out to eat or you're out shopping, so that you can't remember all these things, or at least I can't. So it's an easy way to help you comply with the fit test and get these foods out of your diet. So they find it very, very useful. So next, let's just talk a little bit about the Zonulin test that we offer, and one that we're developing. So Zonulin as a molecule, it's a mid-sized protein that's found in the body. And what it does is directly opens tight junctions. So what happens is inflammation occurs, the liver starts to synthesize this particular molecule, and this just exacerbates what's already occurring. So tight junctions open up, and if you had intestinal permeability issues, this just makes it worse. So we measure zonulin. So as I mentioned, if you have a lot of foods that you're sensitive to, and you have a high zonulin, that's most likely an indicator of irritable bowel or leaky gut, as they call it. Now, some of the big offenders are gliadin, certainly bacteria, and they all do one thing. They trigger zonulin release. So measurement of this molecule has been very, very useful and helpful for a lot of people. Now, again, just as zonulin as a molecule, it's synthesized in the intestine and liver cells. It's a key biomarker for permeability. It's a reversible. So if you can heal the gut, then zonulin levels go down. So that's something we've also seen in patients over time. Wow. You identify the food, they get it out of the gut, inflammation goes down, zonulin levels go down, and almost without a doubt, the patient feels some relief, feels some better, their symptoms resolve. And again, zonulin, many diseases cause leaky gut or zonulin release. And we talked about a few: autoimmune, celiac, IBD for sure, type 1 diabetes, etc. I won't go through
and asthma's on the list. That surprised
asthma's
me.
On the, yeah, it's again, tight junctions are everywhere. And where you have inflammation, you tend to open these things up. And again, it's chicken or the egg. Were they open and then I get asthma, or did asthma be triggered by an environmental allergen and then it causes tight junctions to open up? So the net result is you have zonulin release, and if we measure it, at least it's a good tip off to the healthcare provider that there's some inflammatory process and we have to look a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot deeper.
Yeah, for sure.
And then clinical studies. We did some interesting clinical studies with the FIT test. So what we did was we did a retrospective study initially, because no one had done this study before. Everybody says food sensitivities, they don't work, it's a bunch of junk, blah, 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 So we said, look, let's see if we can show these tests are at least efficacious. So what we looked at was if a patient came in, and then what we did was say, okay, what are your symptoms? So you list your symptoms much like you go into the doctors, they give you a list your symptoms. Do you have this? Do you have that? And then what's the severity on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 low, 5 very severe. So what we did was we said, okay, what were the test results for these patients? And we broke it down into severe, high, and moderate category. Initially coming in the door, what were the reactivities, and what were they complaining of, and how severe was that? And then we said, okay, let's see if we can't determine that. And then we said, okay, let's identify the foods, get them out of the diet. And then, as I mentioned, once you identify them and it's a trigger food, eliminate them for like even 10 months. Then tight junctions heal. It takes a long time for the gut to heal. Tight junctions mend and food doesn't get through. So then at 10 months, let's retest these people and see if they still have high reactivities. And as you can see, that after 10 months, the severe, high, and moderate reactions went down in a very significant
That's
way.
crazy.
And I love these sorts of studies where you don't need fancy statistics. I don't need to give you a p-value of 0.05, which people just, their eyes roll back. You can just look at this graphic and you can say, wow, these patients came in, they had a lot of high, moderate, and severe reactions. After 10 months, we got them down. They had much, much less of all of those high, severe, and moderate. So then you say, okay, what happened to their symptoms? So we did a symptom checklist. So you can see when they came in early, so memory, concentration. So 22 reported problems on the first test. So 22 out of 25. That's significant. On the second test, only 3 reported problems. And then you look at anxiety, bloating. So you 20, 18.
Wow.
So the take home message here is that patients came in with a lot of symptoms that were much more severe. We identified the foods that they were sensitive to. The antibodies and immune complexes were reduced. Inflammation was reduced. Upon second test, they said, wow, my symptoms have either gone away in some cases or certainly been reduced significantly.
And I want to just, again, for the listeners, anxiety, mood, and depression, there were
Yeah.
20 people reporting that they were experiencing that before. And
Right.
then after the second test, only 3. Oh my gosh. So if you're experiencing mental health issues, and I always say this, I say that it could just be a symptom of an underlying issue in your body that's out of balance. And if food is causing that inflammation and causing or contributing or assisting in leaky gut, whether, like you said, chicken or egg, I mean, that is huge. And things like sleeplessness, and there's even sugar cravings on there. And I think allergies, wow, how many people talk about issues with allergies? And this is really, really important for people to, again, I always say, be your own health advocate. This is a great way to advocate for your health. That's important.
Right. And again, I know other people say, well, you take our test and we can cure you. We don't cure anything. But what we do is we hope to identify foods, reduce inflammation, and the patient feels better. So a patient that comes in and says, I get severe headaches 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, you identify foods. And then after that period of time, it's not like they don't have headaches anymore, but they say, wow, I used to have these almost every day and they were debilitating. I might get one once a month now or once every other week, and it's much less severe. So we say that on that basis, we've helped that patient identify things, get it out of the diet, and they feel quite a bit better. And I think it's been quite effective doing that.
Yeah, this is exciting.
And this was an independent study of another lab that actually did the testing for us at the time. So we, KBMO Diagnostics, did not have control over the patients or the data. So that's even more convincing. This was not an in-house study. It was with another group that was doing the testing at the time.
For sure.
But we did do one more study with irritable bowel, because there's kind of a couple themes that go on with food sensitivities. As I mentioned, bowel problems and skin problems seem to go hand in hand. Mood, anxiety, depression. So you get this brain function or dysfunction with food sensitivities. They seem to go hand in hand. And also, food sensitivities seem to exacerbate other problems that already exist. Like it could be headaches, it could be allergies, where we don't measure IgE, but it's one more factor that you add upon another inflammatory process. If you get the inflammation out, they feel better. So we focused on irritable bowel because we know that a lot of people complain of this, especially these days. Very high occurrence. So 18% of North Americans have irritable bowel. That's, to me, is very, very high. 25% seek primary, secondary care for symptoms, and 5% are seen in a tertiary care setting, meaning they actually end up in the hospital or something like that. And the cost, obviously, is a high prevalence of IBS, is sizable direct costs and physician visits, ER visits, testing, and also different types of drugs, steroids, what have you, to actually treat IBS. So it has a significant impact on a number of people. So we said, okay, what if they use the FIT test to identify foods that cause a problem? If we get them out of the diet, do we identify these foods accurately and do they feel better? So we did this study with William Esselfy, an MD out in California, who actually worked with a very, very large healthcare company at the time. And we tried to evaluate the health benefits and outcomes for irritable bowel syndrome, food sensitivity, in particular, using the FIT test, measuring IgG 1 through 4 and C3d bound to immune complexes. So that was the kind of basis of the study. So what I won't go through all the details. It was double blind, all that sort of thing. We'll go over that a little bit. But the real important thing is you look at the IBS severity score. So to day 1 to the end of study. So 0 is very low severity, obviously none. 500 is high. So you have these questionnaires. In the intervention group, which took the FIT test and removed the foods, there was a 127-point decrease in the severity score. That's significant when you say, okay, the patient came in on day 1 and their score was 425. You've managed to reduce it, more than 25%, which is, again, you're not going to cure these people. They feel better. And when we looked at the randomized control group, we saw a 46-point decrease. So again, what you can see is there was at least a 3 times better result with the intervention group, those that took the test. When we look at homocysteine, which measures vitamins, and it's an amino acid, and less than 15 micromoles per liter is what you want normal. Intervention group, we had a 0.05 decrease. So we had a moderate decrease. And then the control group was actually a small increase. So not a lot of change there, but it was an important biomarker. We wanted to measure that just to see what was going on. So not a lot of news there. Where there is some news is in CRP. So C-reactive protein, that's another molecule that indicates generalized inflammation. It could be a bacterial or viral infection. It could be diabetes. It could be Crohn's disease. So there are a variety of diseases where you all have elevated CRP directly due to inflammation. So we knew that probably happened in irritable bowel because it's just one more inflammatory disease. So in the intervention group, we got a 0.5 decrease, which may not seem like much in the 1 to 3 mg category, but if it's at least going to be 5 or 10% probably, and that is very, very compelling. And in the control group, it's just a 0.1 decrease. So about a 5-fold decrease in the intervention group. And again, you look for small changes that can explain why a patient's feeling better. Again, tests don't tell the whole story. And by taking the FIT test, you don't cure anybody, but you want to see a trend. Is the trend towards the markers going down? Are people feeling better? And is the IBS score being reduced? And in general, I would say this is a good first start that would indicate that the FIT test identifies key foods that are involved in inflammation.
Yeah, this is helpful. And it's just even to reduce symptoms is
Yes.
so huge for so many people. Like you said, not going to heal, not going to treat, cure, all that, but to reduce symptoms when for many people they've tried maybe 1,000 other things, this is helpful.
Right. I mean, in the past, I mean, this is a very, and patients like it because they can take control. I mean, heretofore, and I talked to a few doctors, if I couldn't give you a pill for it or cut it out, the disease wasn't real. But here, if you can identify something, the patient feels better, chances are you can lessen significantly an inflammatory process, and you don't need to give somebody a pill. You can try to nip it in the bud, and then this doesn't set you up for problems later on. And I think that's a big take home message is you got control. And if you feel bad enough, and we have a lot of patients that do, you'll pay attention to the results.
Yeah.
And this kind of illustrates another important fact with these IBS patients. Hospital stays and visits, there was a 10% reduction. And primary care and specialist office visits were also reduced 50%. So that has ramifications more in the insurance realm. Sure, the patient doesn't want to end up in the hospital and go to the doctor, but from an insurance perspective, and this particular physician that we worked for an insurance company. So these are very important parameters for an insurance company, because insurance companies traditionally, they don't want to pay for stuff. But if
Right.
you can say, hey, look, we got a simple test and we can actually prevent things, and it will lessen your cost basis per patient, that's when you get their attention is, oh, I can reduce hospital, I can reduce office visits. Geez, this might actually save us money. That's where you get insurance companies to pay attention. And as I mentioned, this data was based on 100 patients. It was randomized to intervention and control groups. And again, KBMO Diagnostics had no control whatsoever on the results of this study. It was totally blind, and we didn't know the results until the very end, and they came in. So in summary, the clinical outcomes, the FIT test was resulted in twice the IBS severity score reduction than typical cellular tests. The FIT test resulted in 50% improvement in irritable bowel severity score compared with other tests, because we did look at a couple of other tests in parallel with the FIT, and they were not as predictive. So the conclusion was clinical outcomes for IBS are greatly improved when using the FIT test to predict food sensitivities, and that's exactly what we wanted to see. So I would expect these results to get better in a bigger trial with a more diverse population.
Yeah, for sure.
New products, as I mentioned, we have the FIT 176, which is an expanded panel. We're developing Zonulin. That's in process. The current Zonulin test has some cross-reactivity issues, so we're doing that in-house now. FAST test, which is the food antigen sensitivity test. We can measure milk, wheat, and eggs in 8 minutes with 1 drop of blood from a finger snip. We finished completed development there, and we're making the tooling and the automation right now. We do COVID-19 testing, especially in response to the current pandemic. So we have antibody and PCR testing available, which is just boomed. And the important thing is it's EUA authorized tests. These just aren't some homebrew tests. They're EUA authorized. That's very, very important. And they're done in our CLIA lab. This is the new 44 foods for the 176 test. And you can see we've expanded into different types of extracts and added a few different important spices, as you mentioned, and additives and that sort of thing. So people are really starting to come to this test, and they really like this expanded panel quite a bit. So if you're interested, we can help you out there. Now, the next generation Zonulin test, we're measuring Zonulin protein, not antibodies or properdin. Properdin is a cross-reactive protein. You don't want to measure that. So we're getting rid of the cross-reactivity, which is proven to be very, very difficult. The test format will either be blood spot or serum, again, depending on your preference. Dr. Alessio Fasano actually discovered Zonulin. He is at Harvard Medical School right now, and he's a worldwide authority on Zonulin. He's an MD, very, very engaging and bright man. And we're very fortunate to be working with him. And I'm working directly with him. And as I mentioned, I did some rapid tests for HIV, and we're taking the technology that we developed quite a while ago for HIV, and we're rolling it over into food sensitivity testing, which no one else has been able to do, but I thought we could. And it only took 10 years, so it was easy. So anyway, so that's kind of where we are. And we're going to include Zonulin at no cost with all the panels, the 22, 132, 176, as soon as we launch that. So that will be included.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're running a little over on time.
Okay,
so this is great. This is such good information. Is there anything, I mean, I know we're going to have to sum things up, but I definitely am interested in this fast test that you can decide, or you can determine in just like 10 minutes if somebody responds to egg, milk, and wheat. Is that right?
Right. So we want to get 50% of the sensitivities in one test. It's one drop of blood, and you'll be able to do that basically in 8 minutes. You'll have the answer, and it works very, very well. So that will be coming out. We do the COVID-19 testing, as I mentioned. The conclusions are, I just want to leave you with, we focus on quality, ISO 13485, FDA, and CLIA. We have a patented test. We have great compliance tools. We've shown to have excellent clinical outcomes, and we have new products that are just coming out now. And we have very good scientists and physicians helping develop those. So I thank you very much. Sorry for running over, but I do appreciate everybody listening in today.
That's awesome. I mean, it is so much good information, and I am just fascinated by everything that you've put together, and all the information that you've given us, I think can be so helpful for people to, I mean, if they want to, I'll hopefully be working with the FIT test to offer this test to people so that I can help coach on the elimination diet aspect of it, because that part can get really overwhelming, like you see, oh, I'm reacting to this, this, and this. How do I actually, eliminate these things from my food in a realistic way? And I am there to help people with that. And so I am so thankful for your knowledge, your expertise, and everything that you've shared today. Thank you so much for being on.
You're welcome. And if anybody has any questions, please forward them to Erin, and I'd be happy to answer those for you.
And the website, I need to make sure I catch the website and list that. Will you give everybody the website?
Yes, it's www.KBMO Diagnostics, plural, .com.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, everybody can look there for the testing and more information. But again, I will put this PowerPoint on YouTube so that you can see the visuals and all the information, because I think that's going to be really helpful for everybody too. So again, I appreciate your time. This has been so helpful.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and stay well.